Hey, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of SalesVibe by our Hot Seat. Today, I'm joined by Kristine Kingery, Senior Manager of Procurement at Arby's Restaurant Group. Kristine, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to answer some questions for sales folks out there that really are looking to get some insight on, how you as a buyer think, how you interact with salespeople, and then maybe what it's like, working with you, selling to you, working within, and selling to your company. So I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions today, and would love to hear your feedback.
Okay.
So let's start off with, I just read your title, but why don't you talk about your particular responsibilities and really what you're in charge of buying there at Arby's?
So in my position, I'm responsible for strategic sourcing, managing and ensuring supply, ensuring quality of goods, and ensuring continuous supply for the restaurant group.
Okay.
The way we're set up is in categories. So I manage all of the beverages, the packaging, the disposables, and the cleaning program.
Okay. So that's pretty that's pretty big and pretty broad is what you're in charge of. So, and how long have you been in this position at Arby's?
So I've been at Arby's for just about 3 years now.
Okay. And you've pretty much been in the same role since you've been there, same type of role, buyer role.
Correct. I've always been in procurement while I've been at Arby's, and through the course of 3 years, I've taken several different categories. So I've had different categories, but I've always been in procurement.
Okay. So, I think it's the proverbial $64,000 question. What everybody wants to know as a salesperson, how does a salesperson engage with you? What's the best method of contact? Sort of what info or style or method gets your attention? How does somebody engage with you if they want to, sort of pitch you their product, if you will?
I get obviously a little bit of everything. Some people send things direct in the mail. Sometimes I get emails. Sometimes I get phone calls. I personally am not a phone call voicemail person. I prefer to communicate over email. And a lot of that in regards to sales is simply because of the high volume of incoming correspondence that I receive. It's nice to have it in email form because I keep actually a specific file on my computer for sales information. So it's an easy way for me to go back and reference the information. So I really prefer to get it in email, also because there's a lot of times that I have to sort of return correspondence during non-business hours. So replying to emails after business hours is something easy to do. Phone calls are really something that need to happen during business hours, and that can be complicated sometimes.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So, as far as I guess the content of the emails, I mean, do you like a lot of information, a little bit of information, include attachments? I mean, kind of what works best for you to digest the information that you get?
It's always nice to get enough information to get an understanding of your company and what you're trying to sell. At the same time, you don't want an overwhelming amount of information that I'm not going to be able to process quickly. So it's nice to have it sort of laid out in bullet points, something pretty concise, so that I can very easily see what it is you're trying to sell, and why it is that you think you're a good fit for the Arby's restaurant group. I would say for me, the most important part of the correspondence itself is that there's sort of a clearly stated business case, as you will, as to why you think your product is good within our system. I get a lot of correspondence and a lot of cold calls for products that don't have a place in our system, would never have a place in our system, and it's very obvious that that would be so. So I think that showing me that your product is relevant to what we do is very important part to call out within your communication. As far as attachments go, it's always nice, especially what I do with packaging. It's very graphic oriented, so it's always nice to be able to see pictures of items. At the same time, you just want to be cognizant of making sure that your attachments aren't too large and that you're clogging up somebody's inbox.
Right, right, and that totally makes sense as far as, you want to understand, or you want to know that the person that's trying to sell to you understands your business. So I think that's a great point, and I think that's missed a lot, right? Because they just blast it out. It's a food product. Of course, Arby's would want it, right? Well, in reality, no, they're probably not going to have a lot of use for taco shells.
That's correct. That's correct. And it's very obvious on this side of the table when I receive correspondence and it is a huge blasted correspondence and maybe they've filled in my name, Dear Christy at the top, and then maybe Arby's Restaurant Group somewhere within the bottom of the email, and I can tell it's been copied and pasted to a bunch of people.
Right.
It's always very obvious when somebody tailors something to me, to my specific needs, to Arby's specific needs, and that goes far.
Right. Okay, good. So that kind of dovetails into my next question, and I think I know the answer to this, but what is something or multiple things that salespeople do that just really annoy the crap out of you?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what I just touched on. Is sending me information that's not relevant to my business or the company that I work at. It's definitely a personal pet peeve, as I'm sure it is for a lot of people that work in procurement. Another thing that it sort of falls into that category as well. A lot of times I try my best when people are calling on me. If they've got something that's fairly relevant to the system, I always do my best to get them in for at least a 30-minute meeting. And when I've got you on the calendar for a 30-minute meeting, I appreciate when we can keep the meeting to 30 minutes. And there are some people that come in with a presentation that's much more than 30 minutes, and that certainly is inconvenient at times.
Right. So a message there is to certainly be respectful of your time. So how did you get into this role or this profession? I mean, I don't. Looking at your background, your resume, you went to a design school, right? So you're a designer by trade, and now you're buying products for a fast food chain. So how did you make that jump or that switch?
That's correct. I don't think most people probably set out in their lives to work in procurement. But as a matter of fact, to be honest, supply chain management as a career and as programs within colleges and universities has become much more important and kind of come to the forefront as being a very important part of daily business. So, to be honest, before I came here, I was a business analyst at a law firm for about 7 years. And within that position, I was responsible for all of our vendor management. So that vendor management piece sort of corresponded directly into what I'm doing now in procurement, managing all the relationships with our vendors. And before that, I worked in design for a while, at fashion design and costume design, and it's kind of one of those things that there's clearly a difference between a career and a hobby, and it was a hobby that I loved and I still love very much, but it was just not meant to be a career for me.
Gotcha. Okay. And that makes sense. I mean, that progression, when you lay it out like that, it makes sense. So let's see, a couple of other things. References. When you ask for or get references, what are you looking for when you call that reference? What are you asking them? Is there anything in particular that, because obviously everybody's going to serve up the reference that is their best reference or multiple references that, of course, are going to say great things about them. So how do you deal with that to get something, that's worthy to you out of that?
To be honest, I personally don't rely very heavily on references for that very specific reason. And sometimes I do my own diligence to sort of find my own references for people.
Gotcha.
But a lot of times, when I'm calling a reference, it's really to just kind of get an idea of more or less the customer service that we can expect to get out of a company. As far as whether it's production capacity or capabilities or anything in that regard, that's all numbers, data that I can find places. If I'm calling to talk to somebody, it's because I want to get an idea of perhaps it's the exact sales rep that I'm going to be working with. I want to get to know a little bit more about them, or just the general customer service team within the company, what I can expect to get from them.
Okay. So there's this term going around called it's called the buyer revolution is the term that's being thrown around, and that's the idea that before any salesperson ever calls you, you're already down the path, you've already done the due diligence and the research, and you know as much, if not more, than the salesperson that's calling you. How much of that is true versus, the salesperson calling on you and you saying, wow, I didn't know about that, or I didn't understand, or I didn't know that category existed, or that product line, or that, that's great, I want to know more. How much of that happens versus when they call you, you're pretty dialed in to what they're calling about, and, and then it's just their job to convince you or talk to you why, their firm or their company would be the best choice for you guys to go with.
For the most part, I would say that's correct. We've got a pretty good idea of what we want, what we need in the direction that we're going before we really ever get on any calls with people. But, I would say as far as what they can offer me sales-wise on the phone, people are always, especially within the packaging industry, coming up with new products, new patents on designs, maybe some new innovative substrates. So there are new things within the industry to report. So I would say that within that buyer revolution, where salespeople are really empowered is when they're with a company that is strong into innovation, and they give that salesperson something new to come to the table with. That's when we get sort of new, exciting information. That's always great to have somebody call and let me know about a new product line and bring me samples. So I would say that's kind of true. That's kind of false. At the same time, probably a little biased opinion for me because I do work for a large company. So there's only a handful of suppliers out there that can supply us in the level and quantities that we need. So as buyers, we're pretty tuned into the people out there, the main players in the market who can service our needs.
Right. So that's an interesting point, and obviously there's a lot of companies that are in that same situation, regardless of the space that they're in. Right. They're large companies. They're established. There's certain vendors that can take care of them. So what would you say to the little guy, the up and comer, the upstart that's trying to, it's got something cool and new and exciting? I mean, I guess what you just said, if it's innovative, if it's interesting, then you'll take a look at that on the sheer sort of creativity, innovativeness of that particular product. Would that be correct?
Yeah, it's something that we do. We always take a look at. We always want to be on the cutting edge of technology. And I think the best advice for them is to sort of keep trying, keep in touch, keep showing that your product is good, but at the same time, you don't want to be overwhelming because you need to be cognizant of the fact that the people that we are doing business with for a long time. Just as a rough example, the company that provides our tray liners for our trays have been providing them to us for 20 years. And we are very responsible about sourcing, and we reward suppliers who do well for our system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very hard for new guys to sort of, without a reputation of being able to maintain a certain service level, it's hard to get into a large system. So, what's always great is if they can start with a smaller concept or a small test at a larger concept, so that when they come to me, they can say, hey, you know what, I'm talking with, this guy at McDonald's, or we did this test at Wendy's, or, we're in this small chain up in Massachusetts, to at least give me some examples that you're out there, you're able to produce, you can meet some obligations, and sort of start to gain the confidence of the buyer.
Okay, great. That's great. Great advice and great insight. So, Christy, I want to thank you for joining us today. I've got one final question before we leave, and then I'll let you go. So here it goes. A penguin walks into your office right now wearing a sombrero. What does he say, and why is he there?
To be honest, I wish a penguin would walk into my office right now, but I think he would probably tell me that my dinner is ready, and he would be bringing me something to eat. Perhaps some Mexican food.
Well, on that note, I think I know what you want to go do right now. So, thank you again for joining us. This has been great insight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.